My name is Tsenguun, and I'll be moderating today's webinar. So I'm very pleased to meet you all today in this webinar. The title is Participatory Evaluation for Climate Resilience in Mongolia. And we are organizing this webinar as part of the gLOCAL. And this webinar is brought to you by Mongolian Evaluation Association, Public Lab Mongolia, and National University of Mongolia. And I myself I'm a member of Mongolian Evaluation Association. And in this webinar, I'm also joined by two of fellow members, Mr. Sanchir Jargalsaikhan, who's also a co-chair of the ESG Evaluation Topical Interest Group of Mongolian Evaluation Association, and Ms. Ariunaa Norovsambuu, who's an organizational member of Mongolian Evaluation Association. And I'm also joined by two other speakers, who are Ms. Chuluunkhuu Baatar, Climate Change Advisor to the Minister of Climate Change, Minister of Environment and Climate Change of Mongolia, and Mrs. Bayartsetseg Terbish, Associate Professor at the Department of Sociology and Social Work at National University of Mongolia. I will now share my screen to show you a brief slides. So you may have already, our webinar will last for roughly about an hour, and we will first set the scene, explaining why we chose this topic particularly and why we're focusing on the Mongolia's example, climate resilience and the nexus and its nexus with participatory evaluation. And then we will proceed to ask questions from each panelist, and then we will also welcome questions from the audience. So please feel free to write your questions in the chat. And so after we have gone through the questions from the panelists, we will open the floor to the audience. And then we will wrap up and close, and we aim to finish by 4:30. And here you can see a more detailed biography of our speakers, which you may have already seen on the event poster and page on the gLOCAL website. So our speaker, Ms. Baatar, she has led climate finance efforts in Mongolia and currently advises the Minister of Environment and Climate Change on private sector engagement, carbon markets, and regulatory reform. Thank you for joining us. And we also have Mr. Sanchir Jargalsaikhan, and he's a political scientist, developer practitioner, and consultant with over a decade of experience in international public and CSOs, with expertise in governance, ESG, and sustainable development. And we also have Ms. Dr. Bayartsetseg. She's an associate professor at the National University of Mongolia and a research fellow at UNU-CRIS, and her research focuses on social policy, migration, and climate adaptation. And she has conducted several research projects, studies among urban residents in the Ulaanbaatar city, the capital of Mongolia. And she combines her academic and community-based work in these studies. And lastly, but not least, we are joined by Ms. Ariunaa Norovsambuu. She's a co-founder and executive director of Public Lab Mongolia NGO. Ms. Ariunaa is a seasoned project management professional with over a decade of experience in environmental policy and governance. And at Public Lab Mongolia, she promotes open data for climate resilience, engaging communities to assess resource management, natural resource management, and climate risks, and supports local resilience through community participatory approaches. And I myself am Tsenguun Tumurkhuyag, and I'm a sustainability and development practitioner, and I've joined Mongolian Evaluation Association since 2022. And I'm also a member of the ESG and climate evaluation topical interest groups at the association. And thank you very much. So now, before we proceed to the questions from our panelists, I just wanted to give you a brief context to Mongolia's climate change situation and why we are focusing on it in today's webinar. So just like all countries around the world, climate change remains one of the major barriers to Mongolia's sustainable development. And in terms of average temperature, it has increased by over 2.5 degrees in the past 85 years, and this is almost like 3 times more than faster than the global average. And as a result of this change, natural disasters, droughts, and also the very locally unique harsh winter condition called dud, and floods have tripled over the past decade. And this has resulted in climate-induced mitigation and rapid urbanization. And in the last 2 decades, with frequent natural disasters and particularly these harsh winter conditions, the livestock losses and the challenges maintaining livelihoods in rural areas of Mongolia has become increasingly challenging, and hence leading to a mass migration to the urban areas of Mongolia, but particularly the capital Ulaanbaatar, which is now home to like half of the country's total population of 3 million. But Mongolia is a very vast country, but now we are all crammed into this one city, which is like less than 1% of the nation's territory. And in Mongolia, both urban and rural communities are experiencing negative climate impacts in their livelihoods and well-being on a daily basis. And mitigation adaptation gap, this is a problem that's still not fully addressed globally, and it's also like reflected in Mongolia. So adaptation finance gap is still extremely large, and as a result of this gap, there is insufficient adaptation efforts targeting communities, vulnerable groups of people, and despite escalating climate impacts. And Mongolia's estimated adaptation needs are about around 5 billion. And Mongolia has developed a national adaptation plan for 2030, and it focuses on enhancing climate resilience across sectors, but there are significant financial constraints. And we wanted to highlight this mitigation adaptation gap that when you go through the climate finance flows to the Mongolia, most of the projects, the bulk of the climate finance commitments have been allocated to mitigation efforts, renewable energy and energy efficiency, and private sector loans. And just to take an example, within the GCF funded projects in Mongolia, there are about 12 projects, and only one project focuses solely on adaptation, and the remaining projects are either mitigation or cross-cutting projects, and they are multi-country projects. So like among almost like $500 million GCF commitment to Mongolia, only $20 million is focused solely on adaptation focused project. And hence we wanted to link this climate change problem to the participatory evaluation and how participatory evaluation can help address this unbalanced climate intervention and how to make it more inclusive and effective. So participatory evaluation, as many of you may already know, it's an evaluation approach that actively involves stakeholders in the evaluation process, from the design to implementation to all throughout the cycle of the evaluation. And it aims to democratize evaluation by sharing control over decision-making, data collection, analysis, and most importantly, it ensures that the evaluation reflects the needs of those directly affected by the interventions. And the key features of participatory evaluation are stakeholder involvement, empowerment, and capacity building, and contextual relevance. So participatory evaluation enables incorporation of local knowledge and cultural context, and hence it enables more accurate and applicable insights. And within the participatory evaluation, we are also, in this webinar, we are particularly focusing on local communities. And to that point, I want to also highlight why strengthening community ownership in evaluation is closely linked to participatory evaluation, and why we chose this as our webinar's focus. So community ownership and strengthening it is increasingly recognized as essential for more equitable, effective, and sustainable outcomes of interventions. So it helps redistribute power, and it benefits marginalized groups such as women, youth, indigenous peoples, and people with disabilities. And importantly, it also, through bringing the local knowledge and lived experience of communities, community ownership in evaluation ensures that evaluations are grounded in cultural realities and practical needs. And hence, our webinar title is Participatory Evaluation for Climate Resilience, but we will be talking within the participation of different stakeholders, we will be focusing more on the communities. Okay, so with this, so this slide also shows like the benefits of additional benefits of the community ownership in evaluation. So, and now let me go through the. Now let me ask the first question from Mr. Sanchir Jargalsaikhan.
Yeah, please proceed.
Okay, sorry. Now let me just quickly open something. I need to briefly stop sharing my screen. Okay, so okay, so first question to you is in the global south, in developing countries, there is this common tendency to perceive evaluation as the compliance and reporting tool to meet project, the donor, sponsor, and client requirements. So what should we do to transform evaluation into a learning and policy improvement tool rather than just a compliance requirement? Thank you.
Thank you, Tsenguun, for the question. And my greetings to all of the esteemed guests who are signed on to this webinar. So, of course, I would love to start by just giving a brief context of what is this situation on not only evaluation but monitoring and evaluation in Mongolia. And of course, as with many institutions, development projects, especially evaluations, were introduced due to donor requirements in Mongolia. From a memory, the first evaluation I saw was in 2006-07 when I was studying in the US, and I worked briefly with the United Nations Food Program on that independent evaluation. So yeah, it's quite a recent phenomena to put everything in context. Regarding common problems and issues with evaluation as well as monitoring, it's very, very similar to many developing countries, as well as probably with many developed countries. One is, of course, it's a new thing, and it's because it's a very new phenomena. The ecosystem-wise, there are significant gaps and as well as significant asymmetries. For example, you can see like lots of different requirements coming from different donors and the related implementers, and for example, if UNDP has their own evaluation criteria and another UN agency might have another criteria. So you have, when you look at the ecosystem in Mongolia, you have this dispersed asymmetric view, not only evaluations, but dispersed state of also data availability connected to these different dispersed interests and different projects and different institutions. And related to, of course, to this ecosystem issue, you have more of a cultural issue in a sense that evaluations are mostly and predominantly done through donor as well as funder requirements. And it's used mostly as a compliance tool, very similar to reports, etc., etc. So, for example, a particular donor or a particular organization might implement a particular project, and they have required to put certain amount of resources, time to do an evaluation, both interim, final, and maybe even post factor. So this phenomenon relates to the previous point that the ecosystem where there are funders, there are data, and of course there are implementers is very, very dispersed. So because of this dispersed nature of the ecosystem, different stakeholders and different players have different capacities, different incentives, etc. So in a nutshell, it's probably very similar to many developed countries. This is the situation of not only evaluation, but M&E in Mongolia.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. A very insightful answer. So building on this answer, I would like to invite Dr. Bayartsetseg to share her opinion on. So just as Sanchir mentioned, so this like project management, the project environment within the developing countries, there are like many challenges. And so for any successful project implementation, particularly the development intervention, and today we're focusing on climate projects specifically. So from you, I would like to ask, so to ensure like successful development interventions and climate interventions, and how should we ensure the project stakeholders and particularly the local communities possess or like obtain knowledge and skills that help them better understand the significance of monitoring and evaluation and actively participate in the monitoring and evaluation of this intervention so that they can voice their needs and help enhance the project efficiency. I hope that question was clear.
Yeah. Thank you, Tsenguun, and hello to everyone. That's a very critical question, I think, and yeah, we talk a lot about capacities and skill building of the parties involved in the evaluation process. And where at the current stage, I'm afraid we mostly include governmental and non-governmental entities paying lesser attention to the community effect. That's my personal intake. So I personally think capacities and skills of the general public should also be considered critical and significant at the equal level as we would consider the other parties as well. But when I say this, it doesn't mean we focus purely on the capacity building interventions for community members, but rather probably we approach to the knowledge more like enabling what the people already know about the circumstances, about the environment, about the climate conditions and change. So encouraging or revealing their kind of intangible resources that people already hold. And yeah, what we can do is reflect upon what people have been doing within their communities. So as an example, I can think of, for example, our pastoralist herders in Mongolia, who we know carry a lots of tremendous inheritance of knowledge of pasture maintenance, or how we collectively approach to the community endeavors against the climate change and etc. So these are all needs to be, my point is, needs to be just enabled or reflected and respected.
Thank you very much. So the main takeaway I got is that instead of focusing on the developing the capacities or skills that they do not yet possess, they should instead focus on capitalizing on the the knowledge and insights they already have and voice it out. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, because it's a kind of a common knowledge, a common kind of approach that we try to like train or we try to train people as much as we want to, but there are like a lots of tremendous knowledge already there in the field, which we kind of disregard in some respect. So yeah, that's exactly right. What you kind of wrapped it up. Thank you.
Thank you. So with this, I very quickly gave you a context on climate change in Mongolia and some of the key challenges, but this was very brief. So to orient our discussion further, I would like to invite Ms. Chuluunkhuu Baatar, advisor to the Minister of Environment and Climate Change of Mongolia. And I would like to invite you to share your experience and opinion. So based on your experience advising the government of Mongolia in climate finance and policy efforts, what do you see as the main challenges that prevent, the progress? And climate it's becoming an increasingly an urgent issue, but even though we try as hard as we can, the progress is not always easy to achieve. So what do you see as the main challenges in your work with the government stakeholders and also diverse international and local stakeholders? Thank you.
Good afternoon and good morning. And thank you, Tsenguun. Thank you, Mongolian Evaluation Association, for organizing the event and having me on this panel discussion. And if there is no policy, no finance, right? No finance, no implementation. So let's start with the policy, whether we have a climate policy. Yes, we do, I would say, but there is a national determined contribution. We, as a commitment to Paris Agreement that's approved by the government. And in parallel, we have a national adaptation plan, as you introduced earlier during your presentation, which is approved by the National Committee on Climate Change. This national adaptation plan is not approved by the government. So National Climate Committee is more like voluntary, and there is no supporting secretariats. Their mandate is not as strong as government's mandate to implement some policies. So at the policy level, there are some issues in terms of making the policy into like annual action plan of the different ministries. So when there is let's say we do have policies now, what we could do, it needs to be translated into action in projects, right? So that we could access finance, but that project development requires research-based and localized solutions and inclusive stakeholder engagement, and requires a significant capacity, institutional capacity in terms of, how to make the project bankable, how to prepare. And so when it comes to climate science, yeah, we do have some research and sciences there, institutions and monitoring systems at the nationwide is set up and it's running fine. However, when it comes to localized solutions and inclusive engagement in designing the project that's really contextualized at the local level, there are some gaps, and most importantly, we we have limited capacities at the national level as well as local level in terms of project development, how to make the project, bankable, also meeting the requirements of international climate funds, for instance. And there are certain gaps in terms of resources. also, most importantly, I would highlight that lack of coordination among different sectors. It's not about environmental ministry, but it is the local government. It's about energy sector and agriculture sector and urban development issue. So there is limited coordination between sectoral ministries and between national and local stakeholders. And this is a quite a core challenge, I would mention, the lack of coordination plus limited capacities, and most importantly, limited engagement of local communities. I could not highly agree enough with previous speaker, the Bayartsetseg doctor, about how to leverage the local knowledge. So we do have, sustainable traditional practices, and we really need to reintroduce it or scale it up in terms of, the changing environment. So I would stop there, and let's, if you have further question, happy to respond. Thank you.
Thank you very much for a very comprehensive and nuanced answer. And I cannot agree with you more on the lack of coordination and specifically the position of the Ministry of Environment within the government of Mongolia. And when I was doing my master's thesis, I was reviewing the government authorities responsible for climate change issues. And just within the Ministry of Environment, the climate change coordination unit have been established and de-established like so many times just in the last decade. And this is this contributes to lack of institutional memory, and just within the ministry there are these challenges. And when the Ministry of Environment coordinates with the other like more powerful ministries like the Ministry of Finance, maybe Ministry of Construction and Ministry of Energy, so the Ministry of Environment is in a very difficult position. And also the fact that the removal of the Ministry of Environment as one of the key ministries is also makes it harder for the Ministry of Environment to mobilize this more concentrated effort on the climate policy.
Exactly. Given these circumstances, ministries, preparing the law, framework law on climate change, we really,
for the first time.
For the first time, we aim to really mandate the roles and responsibilities of different stakeholders. And we want to prescribe what, who should do what at the local level, national level, and maybe how citizens, communities could participate, and how NGOs and how private sector should engage, and what would be the incentives, financially or regulatory incentives that should introduce in order to, encourage more active participation from different stakeholders. So that's the ongoing work I'd like to mention.
Thank you very much. So very looking forward to the approval of the national law on climate change. So hope it provides a more enabling environment for more effective policy making and coordination. And you mentioned that you identified the three main challenges, which are the lack of coordination, the limited capacity, and lastly the limited local engagement. And this also builds on the point made by Dr. Bayartsetseg. And for this, I would like to invite the fourth speaker, Ms. Ariunaa. So as I mentioned earlier, Ms. Ariunaa is the executive director and co-founder of Public Lab Mongolia. So Public Lab Mongolia works very closely with local communities, both in rural and urban areas, and in addressing environmental public health issues, particularly climate change issue. So I would like to invite Ms. Ariunaa to share your experience, and could you please talk about like what community engagement and assessment methodologies that Public Lab Mongolia has used over the years, and what are the key observations that you have gathered from this experience? Thank you.
Great. Thanks for the question, Tsenguun. You hear me well? Right.
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Great. Yeah. So far it's been quite an interesting discussion. I've been actually taking some notes, and yeah, I totally agree with the previous speakers. On the importance of local knowledge, the importance of government support, and then also the idea about like this pushback against evaluations to serve as donor accountability only. And as an NGO representative, I think I'm going to talk more about the importance of localized data, the importance of participatory approaches, I think, in participatory, or even more specifically, the community-led evaluation. Because at Public Lab Mongolia, well, our core mission is all about building resilient communities, and we do this by using data, using localized, location-based open data. And a big part of our work focuses on encouraging data-driven decision-making, helping the youth and civil society members in achieving the SDGs, especially when it comes to environment and public health issues. And one of our main methodologies that we've been using over the past couple of years is so-called Community Climate Resilience Mapping Tool. And it's quite a practical and participatory tool, I would say. This is where we work together with communities to identify climate vulnerabilities, their adaptation capacity, their local resources, and all these happens through mapping and through the help of visual tools like satellite images. And the process itself is actually quite very hands-on. Committee members, they come together, including women, youth, elders, and they come together to join sessions where they map out, for instance, flood-prone zones, or the water points, or the local roads, hospitals, bridges. And it's a great way to bring the local knowledge with to combine the local knowledge with location-based spatial data. And what's powerful is how this contributes to today's topic, to community-based evaluation. And first, I think it really empowers local voices. It helps communities to define what the resilience means for them, and also it also helps them to see the change that is happening. And it also gives a good baseline for tracking progress. For example, as you work together with communities on follow-up maps, you can really show if, for instance, tree planting or improvements in the neighborhoods. It could be like all sorts of improvements, right? A drainage improvement, or more streetlights, or more roads, whether these kind of improvements have made any difference in the neighborhood or not. And it also builds trust and ownership, because community is involved in the process from the very beginning, and then they are the ones who are generating the data, but also they are validating and also analyzing the data. So the visual outputs, the maps themselves, are super useful, I think, for advocacy, especially when you're talking to local officials or funders about the given situation. So yeah. Well, I can talk a bit more about our work from last year. For instance, last year we've been working in a couple of provinces, but also in the city, in suburban areas, to conduct research on how climate change is affecting the local neighborhoods, their environment, and how this is affecting the migration pattern. And you'd be actually very surprised to see how people how precisely people know what's going on. And they'll say things like, well, okay, look, these are the streets that were badly flooded last summer, or okay, this is the area where previously we used to have lots of grass, Now there's no grass, nothing is left for sheep or cattle to eat, etc. And I think what's interesting and remarkable about the process is that this local knowledge, local data, community-generated data, it often matches official data as well. I mean, we do lots of cross-checking and validation of data with secondary sources like the National Statistics Office or the Office of Land Registration, etc. And often community data aligns quite well with the government records, but sometimes they provide even more information and insight about the situation. They reveal things which are not in the official reports, and which is great. So overall, I guess this whole hands-on process, the participatory approaches that we try to use and utilize in our engagements with the community, these are quite very helpful when it comes to making the evaluation more focused, based on real localized data, real lived experiences of the people. Yeah, I guess that's briefly about the methodologies that we use and how we see it being useful for community-based evaluation, I think.
Okay, thank you very much. So, so it really strikes to me that the local knowledge aligns with the official knowledge sources, but most importantly, it brings like an additional previously unreported the findings or new data points. That's very important and valuable. And for that, I want to follow up, and I want to ask, so for you to collect very quality field data and for you to like organize very fruitful interviews and engagement with local communities, what are the key like factors, like what resources or like what makes the field work successful with local communities? Is it like a well-prepared, well-trained team, or like and how do you make it work at Public Lab Mongolia? So like, do you train the interviewers well ahead in advance, or and also does the support from the project client and sponsor make it possible? So maybe just wanted to learn more about what makes.
Yeah, definitely. The team itself is trained in the methodology, right? But I mean, we don't specifically train the interviewees or the participants of research. We just how do you say? We just make it easier for people, for communities to meaningfully participate in assessments and evaluations through our methodologies. And I think in Mongolia we talk a lot about community participation. It's in speeches, it's in reports, it's in policies, but in reality, we don't have the right tools to truly connect with the communities. And for instance, I've seen so many community meetings organized by politicians, for example, where the setup is it's just actually quite very interesting. The officials are up on the stage usually, and then the community is down below, just listening mostly. And if you just look at the setup, it's not a conversation setup, right? It's most like a performance setup, and there are just no easy, accessible, or user-friendly tools and methodologies to actually help communities to participate meaningfully. And that's why we come here with our approaches and methodologies. And at Public Lab Mongolia, we truly believe that this community resilience, adaptation, all this starts at the very local level. And for that, you need local level assessments, right? And you need local level evaluations. But to make it happen, you should really have the right tool in your hands. The tools that are clear, participatory, and sometimes even fun, so that the process becomes like much more meaningful for the people, for the community to be part of. and so that it's not just data collection from the people. It's about like building local capacity for them, and it's about local data ownership, and engaging like diverse community members is also important in whole resilience building, climate change adaptation process, because only through inclusiveness you can achieve like more sustainable results. Yeah, and personally, and also I think my team believe that community-based evaluation should be part of creating more like resilient and adaptive, adaptive systems and communities. And for that to happen, you really need to have the right tools in your hands, and you need to work with local data and make the local data open data, so that this data contributes to further decision making.
Okay, thank you very much. So I hope the audience has learned a lot about the public labs experience and its unique findings on integrating community knowledge in projects and evaluation. So if you are interested, just as Ms. Ariunaa mentioned, so one of the recent projects that Public Lab Mongolia has completed with support of the International Organization for Migration, the recent publication documents the evaluation findings, the project findings, and also you can learn more about this unique tool that Public Lab Mongolia deploys, and the resulting maps showing the interrelationship between climate change, gender, and other issues. So I will share the link to the publication later in the chat. So now I would like
sorry,
to
just something to clarify, Tsenguun. I mean that report you just mentioned, that wasn't really an evaluation thing. It was mostly research
yes.
that it connected. Yeah.
Oh yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for the correction. And so I would like to go back to our panelist speaker, Mr. Sanchir. So we've just heard a lot about the value of the local knowledge and how accurate it's found to be, and also even like it adds to the existing official knowledge. And so, but there is still this tendency to, I think, even among the local communities themselves, that they maybe not recognize or value their knowledge, as mentioned by Dr. Bayartsetseg. And so, how does it affect the more effective participatory evaluation with local communities? So, could you share your thoughts on this, like knowledge hierarchy, like knowledge what is considered as legitimate and official knowledge, and where does like local communities knowledge stands? And in your experience working with different project stakeholders, like where does it stand? So thank you. And hope you can see the slides that Sanchir is sharing.
Thank you, Tsenguun, for your great moderated work. It's really interesting because lots of points made by our previous speakers resonate with me very, very closely, in a sense that I had all three hats before, as an academic, as a funder, as a project implementer, as well as a government advisor. So all of these points resonate with me very, very well, and bring lots of positive as well as negative emotions also. So we just talked about the ecosystem in Mongolia, where projects happen, where people evaluate and people monitor, right? So I think some of the things go. Some of the problems actually we can trace to how everything, right? Especially the knowledge, especially the concept like evidence is conceptualized, and implicitly as well as discretely, as well as implicitly, as well as explicitly. And because of that, and how implicitly, especially concept like evidence and knowledge is conceptualized, it has effects through the whole project lifecycle. So I would try to demonstrate this in an example Do you guys see this table? So
Yes.
please do not dwell on the text because it's it's a screenshot and it's very small font. The main point I'm trying to make is whether we call a project or an intervention participatory or not is probably not the main critical point. The main point for me, at least as a practitioner, is what is the theory of change, right, behind your project or intervention. For example, this is the ADAPT project interim evaluation report from my previous employers, UNDP Mongolia. So this project is usually taken as one of the most progressive as well as like cutting edge projects that happened in Mongolia. And one of the main factors that people call it as cutting edge is that it tries to look at problems systematically. Look at the herder, and is there a job for this herder, right? Is there a community that supports the herder? Is he working in a sustainable, is he or she working in a sustainable way, and how it affects adaptation and so on and so on. And the project doesn't itself call it as a participatory project, but for me, the main thing is the main leverage point and main theory of change is participatory in a sense that the empowering herders and communities is the main critical point for this project, but they do not call themselves a participatory project, right? So in a sense, that's what my point is actually. Whether you call your project explicitly participatory or not is not the main factor. If your project rationale puts the actors, especially the communities, in front and center, it is automatically a participatory project. So I will go back and try to abstract a little bit, right? What is usually considered as evidence and knowledge in international development sector? For example, there is a very, very clear hierarchy, right? By methodological rigor. Usually like very, very expensive studies like randomized controlled trials are stipulated as gold standards. And then maybe a little bit down to the line, longitudinal sociological studies and then case studies. And at the bottom level, there are so-called anecdotes, right? What we usually the development community calls anecdotes is people's opinions usually that are on the ground. People's contextually sensitive knowledges, right? For example, like in Mongolia, oral histories, locally recognized forms of knowledge such as ancestral memory, season and animal behaviors, spiritual science, although, etc., have very high weight in that community for that person. But in the international development knowledge hierarchy, it's called anecdote, and it's pulled under that category anecdote, right? So in that sense, in any report, evidence monitoring or any evaluation report, all of those contextually sensitive knowledges are usually just bracketed under umbrella of anecdotal knowledge. And it doesn't receive the same weight as the others, right? So basically, what's the effect is these hierarchies develop usually highly credible local knowledge and locally generated knowledge. So I would like to make just another point. There are many, many points here, of course. And what is the dominant evidence hierarchies also imply is that the mainstream assumption is the best evidence is usually technically valid, it's replicable and generalizable. So usually it means quantifiable and usually generalizable into numbers, basically. So the effect is mostly evaluations try to go from there and then through that evidence hierarchy to go low down, as I previously described. So basically, and then I would like to briefly touch about how to involve the communities as well as impacted communities, right? So usually most of the projects conduct the so-called stakeholder analysis. But traditional stakeholder analysis is very, very Western-centric concept, and it's emanates from Western projects, especially connected with healthcare and agriculture. So in traditional Western-centric stakeholder analysis frameworks, people are usually identified and categorized based on very fixed roles: a mechanic, a teacher, etc., etc., and or usually through its institutional affiliations, member of the local government, member of the teacher councils, or member of the heritage community, etc. But if you look at Mongolia and try to contextualize how stakeholder analysis is done, Mongolians have fluid roles and overlapping roles and identities in one setting. If you go to some center, it is highly likely that a correspondent is both a political party member, maybe a government employee, teacher, a member of local council, maybe even, and probably it could be a shaman also, right? So you have this multiplicity of roles and regulation stipulations, and they have different identities that it's very hard to actually apply a traditional stakeholder analysis in Mongolia. So yeah, the other factors are also very important, such as the importance of informal and kinship networks in Mongolia, importance of moral economies versus interest-based logics that usually economists propagate. Underrepresentation of marginal voices also usually happen through traditional stakeholder analysis, and also spatial and temporal mismatches, such as misrepresenting which is the community. If you look at the herder who is going on a long so-called otter, is he a member of a community where he's residing at that time, or is he a member of his previous community, the usual community, etc. So if you look at this cutting-edge project, look at how they analyze their stakeholders, right? Provincial, some government authorities, some veterinary and animal breeding centers. So you can see a very brief and kind of nominal description. This is this. And description-wise, there is pretty much nothing. They're responsible for managing delivering services, which is an explicit role, but nothing else. How much power do they have? Who constitutes their workers, etc., etc. And then if you look at the second row, herder communities. Suppose the main actors, contributors, as well as beneficiaries of this huge project, right? But look at its description. Herder groups focus on sustainable development, and pretty much that's it. So the point I'm trying to make is that these stakeholder analysis not only come from lack of resources, etc. Those play a role, but they also result from applying uncritically different standardized tools such as stakeholder analysis. So yeah, this is, sorry for taking so much time. Yeah, we could try to elaborate on it a little bit later. Yeah, thank you.
No worries at all. Thank you very much for very informative and insightful presentation on this, the different methods. It was very new to me to learn that to learn this very how do you say, like a fixed and not very flexible nature of this method, such as a stakeholder analysis, and just allocating this very fixed, singular role to the stakeholder groups who could be, who could have multiple identities and multiple different engagement in their communities. And to that, I would like to, it really just reminds me of the Dr. Bayartsetseg's earlier point, and I would like to, so just as as I was listening to Mr. Sanchir, so like if you want to make the project and the assessment truly participatory, as Ari mentioned, the methods need to be right. It needs to be engaging. It needs to be user friendly, but it also makes me think that I can't help think that this participatory research would take longer time, would take much more longer time, maybe bigger research team, and even more resources to achieve this realistic, practical findings. And for that, I would like to listen to both of your opinions. Like, so from Bayartsetseg Doctor, I would like to ask, so how can, like, could you talk about this, like this practical and participatory approaches and research methodologies that enables this sufficient local engagement in studying and assessing maybe the climate impacts, but also we shouldn't limit it only to climate projects, but to like ensure like a sufficient engagement and the true participation, like what methods and approaches exist. And yeah, and would Sanchir, would you agree with that? It would take longer time and resources and to
not necessarily. And I will try to expand on it later.
Thank you. And I would like to invite Dr. Bayartsetseg.
Okay, yeah, thank you. It was very interesting to hear what Ariunaa is talking about, how the Public Lab Mongolia engaged with the communities through the mapping and also the user-friendly data production together with the community members. It was ringing a bell as well for me, that how we do it in the academic environment. And also in addition to Ariunaa's talk and the Sanchir's point also, the considering the multiple roles of in one side, they can be beneficiaries, but on the other side, they can be also the contributors to the fact we're talking about, right? So my connection was unstable when Sanchir was talking, but I think I captured most of the message he wanted to convey in connection to what I'm going to talk. It's the participatory action research, the more reflective practice of participatory action research. I wonder if you mentioned it, or if I'm being kind of repetitive on this point. If not, then I would like to emphasize the participatory action research that most of us know. Actually, I think the most of the participants today in this session know what we talk about PAR, especially when it comes to the reflective practice of it, the informing the stakeholders, especially when we are focusing on the community members, informing the community members what we are talking about in terms of the climate resilience, climate adaptation, maybe by using what Ariunaa was saying, the mapping, or more easy to understand kind of tools, more user-friendly tools, right? Like, and then we reflect upon it, and then we try to make all together as a preliminary decision making, and then we inform back again and we reflect again, right? So I think we're somehow familiar with what I mean by the reflective PAR process. So I just wanted to add into the previous the speaker's point that the PAR is something that at the National University of Mongolia, for instance, we tried to do it in several incidences, cases, and it seemed pretty productive, actually, pretty like a fruitful way of engaging community members into the evaluative process. And lately, we're also using the photo voice in one of the sociological method, a hands-on tool that we know. So photo voice is also kind of backing up pretty well with the PAR process. So yeah, we've been using it in a couple of cases, especially in relation to the urban climate cases, like air pollution, for instance, and the flash flooding. Yeah. So that's maybe that's something I can add on to the very rich points that the previous participants made.
Thank you. And Sanchir, would you like to add on to your previous answer?
Yeah,
to my question.
definitely. I agree with the point that any tool we try to use and as well as disseminate should be accessible. That's, I think, number one necessity. Otherwise, you perpetuate those hierarchies again, right? If you try to start talking with the jargon, you instantly lose the audience, you lose the purpose and everything. So any tool we try to use should be accessible, as well, yeah, and understandable.
Okay. Thank you very much. And we have learned a lot about the participatory approach and tools and different examples that it's being experimented in Mongolia. And now I would like to ask Ms. Chuluunkhuu. Just earlier, Mr. Sanchir, he showed an example example evaluation report completed on one of the adaptation projects funded by GCF, implemented by UNDP. And I was wondering, at the Ministry of Environment, do you find if the ministry officials how frequently do they use these like evaluation reports and findings of previously implemented climate interventions, and do they take them into account in their the policy planning and research and other work? So, and how big and how useful are the evaluation findings and reports within the government? Thank you.
Thank you, Tsenguun, for the question. And let me be a little frank about my answer. To be honest, evaluation reports of different projects, Ministry of Environment oversee quite a number of projects, and all projects are required to do the evaluation in order to comply with the the financiers' requirements. And unfortunately, it's not often used for the policy making or amending the policies, for instance. So it's very unfortunate, but there are, there are some improvements. I noticed that, once the project ended, some actions are, based on the previous lessons learned, then they scaled up, or they, projects expanded to different provinces and different sectors. And at the project level, we could see some improvements. Then evaluation and results are being utilized at designing the next project, for instance. But at the policy level, unfortunately, it's not the case as we speak. But policies are generally top-down based, policy document, and how to make it more local oriented, how to engage more local communities in policy making and adaptation, action, implementation. I really think policies should be people-centered. When it comes to climate change, people think about just the environment, they don't really think about their personal livelihood. Local people, we really need to, decision makers need to look into the sources of livelihood because of climate change, you know, if the herders lose their livestock, what they could do in order to sustainably, you know, provide for their families. And we really need to think about the diversification of their income sources and making the livelihood sustainable, and maybe teaching the new skills to local communities so they could adapt, they don't lose their income. And also in order to really accelerate the implementation and activate the inclusive participation, I personally truly believe that, you know, economic incentives are necessary. You know, if there is a benefit, if there is economic benefit to communities, if they engage in the managing the protected areas, if they manage the pasture, if they reduce their livestock numbers, then they would receive some financial benefits. Maybe they would engage. And also, what's the benefit for them having the traditional knowledge, having the, you know, using the genetic resources to produce some herbal traditional medicines. And it's not really economically valued, but it should be, you know, so something that really, I believe, needs to be introduced is such kind of incentives so that, you know, local communities actively engage in implementation could be accelerated. And we really should focus on the people instead of only the, you know, nature and environment. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. And again, very insightful answer. And each time our speakers provide their answers, I learn something new, and I hope our audience is doing the same. And actually, the time is has passed very quickly, and we have received 2 questions from our audience. So I think to keep time, I'd like to switch to those questions. And the first question is from Anna Barnholt from DeVault, the German Institute for Development Institution. Thanks for joining. So her question is, are there concrete examples of evaluations in the climate sector where the participatory approaches have been used, and is it possible to find them online? And I can send a question. Can you see the question in the chat, Dr. Bayartsetseg? Would you like to answer the question now? Bayar Sanchir?
Oh, so sorry. Again, my connection being so unstable today at the university. Usually it's okay. We're fine, but today it's somehow kind of strange, playing strange. Sorry, what was the question? Is it a question about the question the participant asked? Okay, in the
Yes.
chat. Yeah, it was a question about how he or she can access, right? And publications, I think you can find it quite like easily, especially in terms of experience of the rural communities and how herder communities and pastoralists have been able to be involved in the evaluation process. But when it comes to urban climate issues and the participatory approach used in the urban studies, if you guys can think of some examples, please, yeah, also share it. There will be 2 more publications or reports available by fall, I'm afraid. So I can't really say that they're readily available by now, because one is conducted on the flash flooded area in Ulaanbaatar city, and another one is about the air pollution, the perception of air pollution by the communities and how people experience the air pollution in their everyday life. So that's also will be, I'm afraid, will be published by fall, not now available. Sorry. Yeah. If there are any other research that others could think of, please also share.
Yeah, I will upload a link under the reply section of an organization that do so-called participative monitoring of mining projects, where citizens and herders participate themselves and monitor. So basically, monitoring and evaluation is kind of squished into one another. So it's hard to delineate, yeah.
Thank you very much, Dr. Bayartsetseg and Sanchir. And now I'd like to go to the second question, and this was posted by Sujin Pak from UNEP, and his or her question is, in general, one of the weakness of the evaluation or complaint on the evaluation is that it takes time. The process of evaluation takes time, and I think some people also think the participatory approach can make the process longer. So I wonder if there is any tip not to affect or delay the evaluation due to the participatory approaches. So she had to leave the meeting, but she will watch the recording later to get the answers. So I think this question was something I was asking earlier from Sanchir, and for this, maybe I'm thinking Dr. Bayartsetseg and Sanchir can answer, and also Ms. Ariunaa, what do you think? So I'd like to invite you all to share your thoughts on this. How not to delay the evaluation due to participatory approaches, or does it really take longer time? And earlier Sanchir mentioned not necessarily, right? And could you maybe elaborate on that? If the design is
just,
maybe.
Yeah, I will just approach the opportunity to demonstrate one of my slides. I didn't have time before, so basically it's about choosing the right tools, not choosing the tools before your questions, right? If you look at your question first, what are you trying to do? You can find appropriate tools that can be utilized to make it effective as well as efficient. So if you try to follow the standard narrative about how to evaluate a project or an intervention, you will expend so much resources and different types of resources, so you will end up with nothing, right? So it should start from the planning, planning phase, where you could use participatory methods, where trying to involve herders both in defining success as well as defining the impact metrics, etc. So yeah, basically, I think it depends, of course, on the circumstance and the project, but I think it's totally feasible.
See. That makes sense.
I could just quickly chip in. Well, yeah, I guess it's certainly true that participatory processes are often really time consuming. It can really lead to disengagement, but yeah, again, going back to this methodology thing, but if you do a proper planning and proper design, I think this could be shorter and still meaningful with the right tools in your hands. And for participatory tools that we use, we actually do quite very careful planning of each and every step of the process, so that we manage the process well, and everything is in control, so that no one falls asleep, etc. So, and also I think strong facilitators are important here. So yeah, this is what I can think of, at least in our experience, I guess.
Yeah, and I think especially with organizations such as yours, the process is not kind of disembedded, right? The monitoring or evaluation, but it's time was become beneficiaries become participants at pretty much the same time. So yeah, so that's the beauty of probably those type of initiatives.
By the way, I just remembered one thing that I wanted to make about like Sanchir's Sanchir's point. I think you talked you made quite an interesting point about like communities like having multiple heads, right? And the importance of like identifying the communities well beforehand. And I really agree with the point, because I just remembered the example from our previous study on climate change and migration. And for that study, we've been talking to like numerous herders who lost their like entire livestock in harsh winter situation. And when we approached them as migrants, it was just interesting because every one of them, they identified themselves as herders. Still like herders. I'm a herder. So yeah, I guess it's really important that the surely defined, right? Based on what's the purpose of the evaluation, what's the purpose of assessment, etc. Because yeah, evaluations that categorize people as migrants without considering how they self-identify themselves probably is not the right way, right? So it's really important not to overlook like these important aspects in evaluation, I think. Yeah. Sorry, that was totally different from the question you asked, Tsenguun, but yeah, I just thought that it was an important thing to highlight. So yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, those really helps to get a better picture of the situation. So I think we have another question, and answering this question, I think we can then proceed to the closing. So the question is from Ms. Ertinchimik, the founder of the Mongolian Evaluation Association. So she's asking, what would you say on the community-led evaluation's appropriateness to evaluation type? Is it for developmental, i.e. The beginning, developmental evaluation during beginning and mid of intervention? How is it feasible for terminal evaluation? So is it better to, at what point of the intervention is it better to conduct community-led evaluation at the beginning, in the middle, or at the completion of the intervention? So what would you, and again, like, would like to start with the Sanchir. What do you think? Just it just like connects to your previous.
I have the most boring answer ever. Depends depends on the project probably. I don't know. So the example I shared on the chat is organization called Steps Without Borders. You know, Bayartsetseg. They do a participatory monitoring of different mining projects, starting from the mining's inception even, right? So we have parallel frameworks where environmental as well as social impacts are assessed and need to be assessed for all mining projects. So they, what role they fulfill is not really stipulated in the law itself, but it falls within. It's not written in the law, but it falls within the whole legal infrastructure. So they fulfill, for example, this very important role of monitoring mining projects. So I have no answer.
Can I?
Yes, please.
I can. Oh, sorry.
Sorry. Yeah. I'll be brief. I think the question, how we engage into the community of practice, we also talk about the impacts and the outcomes of the community activities that we engage together with the community. So I don't think there is much difference with the evaluation process as well, because we also try to evaluate our impact that we did together with the community. So how we approach is throughout the process, from the beginning to the end until determination, because community owns it, because it impacts them most, because community members are the ones who knows everything and who's been impacted by the whatever activities that the project has planned, you know. So in that sense, it's key that people understand that this is us who's being impacted most. So that's why we have to be part of every single process. So, but in reality, it's not that easy as it's being said to engage the residents at the all level from the start to the end. Because there is also a kind of a notion that people kind of, what we talk about is probably not professional enough, or what I know is probably not good enough to contribute to what you're asking about. It's probably how we see in terms of community practices that this is probably due to the kind of maybe it's similar to the post-communist context in the countries as well, that we used to follow a many years of welfare state kind of designed, even sometimes imposed community practice to the people, where the community involvement were not much prioritized. So probably that's why, because of that kind of strange legacy, that people believe that, probably what I'm going to say is not that valuable to what you're doing, something like that. So, but I still believe if we try to have the people involved in the all processes, that this is not something impossible, but we try to probably even to try to create like a culture of participation in that sense throughout the process.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, I think I could just add a few things. I think personally, I'm not a professional like evaluator, but I think it's just really important to avoid treating community as data sources, because they are not just the data sources, but also they're the decision makers, right? I mean, they should be the ones to be really involved and engaged in the process. So I think it's really advisable that the community is involved in the process at the early stages, if possible, so that so that their kind of involvement shapes and helps the evaluation process, and so that this whole evaluation process reflects the community needs and priorities from the very beginning. I guess this is what I wanted to say. And yes, it may be costly. Yes, it requires time and effort, but we should make an effort, every effort to have them on board, to have the communities on board, so that they really helping to create grounded, well-focused evaluation results, I guess. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Thank you to all our panelists for your informative and very educational and nuanced answers to these complex challenges of climate change and participatory evaluation and its contribution to addressing this the the lack of balance in the mitigation adaptation interventions and the need to improve the effectiveness of interventions. And I have very much enjoyed the discussion and learned a lot. And I'd like to thank all of our participants, Anna, Goi, Iyi, and the others who were in the call earlier as well. So it was very fruitful discussion. So we've all shared the participation and recording. We will share the recording and presentation to your email, and also to be published on the gLOCAL website and also in the Mongolian Evaluation Association. So thank you very much, everyone, and happy Evaluation Week. Okay, bye. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.